The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Not an invitation, really. A notification. The kind of formality that follows death like a shadow, the administrative aftermath of a life ending. A lawyer's letterhead. A date. A time. A location. The reading of the will of Robert James Caldwell, deceased, survived by two daughters, preceded in death by his wife of 42 years. I held the letter for a long time, standing in the kitchen of the house I'd bought 18 months ago, a house too big for one woman and a 4-year-old, a house with a yard and a swing set, and rooms that echoed with the absence of the man who was supposed to help me fill them. James had never seen this house. James had died in a hospital in Denver, 2,000 miles from where we built our life, 2,000 miles from where I held his hand, while the machines counted down the seconds of our marriage. A car accident. A drunk driver. A phone call at 3 a.m. that split my life into before and after, into the woman who believed in forever, and the woman who knew better. That was 2 years ago. 24 months of single motherhood, of building a business from a laptop at my kitchen table, of learning to sleep on the left side of a bed that still smelled like him on the right. 24 months of being strong because I had to be, because Emma needed me to be, because there was no one else to carry the weight. And now this. My father's death. The man who had watched my sister destroy my wedding and said nothing. The man who had accepted Rachel's explanation. She was unstable, Dad. You know how she gets. Without asking for my side. The man who had sent birthday cards to Emma with checks made out to Rachel, because she handles the family finances now, you understand. I understood. I'd understood for 5 years. Since the Tuesday before my wedding, when Rachel walked into my dressing room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "We need to talk." We'd talked. Or rather, she'd talked. About Mark. About how they'd connected at the engagement party. About how he was having doubts and didn't know how to tell me. About how she'd stepped in to help him figure things out and discovered that what he really wanted was her. "He chose better, Claire," she'd said, the words delivered with the precision of a surgeon extracting a tumor. "You'll thank me someday, when you find someone who actually wants you." I'd stood there in my wedding dress, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, the one with the lace that reminded me of my mother's veil, and felt something inside me go quiet. Not break, not shatter, just quiet. The way a house goes quiet when the power fails, when the hum of electricity stops and you're left with only your own breathing. Mark had confirmed it, of course. Not in person, via text. A text that arrived while I was still wearing the dress, still standing in front of the mirror where Rachel had delivered her verdict. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. Rachel helped me see that we're not right for each other. I hope you find happiness someday." I never replied. I took off the dress, folded it carefully, the way my mother had taught me, the way that made no sense for a garment I'd never wear again. I put it in a box. I put the box in the back of my closet. And I left. Not dramatically, not cinematically, just practically. Packed a bag, withdrew my savings, drove to Denver because it was far enough that no one would look for me. Because James was there, James who'd been my lab partner in freshman biology, James who'd never made a move because he was waiting for the right time, James who opened his door at midnight and didn't ask questions, just held me while I finally cried. We married 6 months later. Small ceremony. City Hall. A judge who smelled like cigarettes and a witness we found on the street. No Rachel. No Mark. No father walking me down an aisle that led to nothing. Just James, and his steady hands, and his promise that he would never, ever make me feel like an afterthought. Emma came 2 years later. The pregnancy was hard, the delivery harder, but James was there for all of it. The 3 a.m. ice cream runs, the midnight panic about money, the 4 a.m. feedings when we were both so tired we could barely see straight, laughing at nothing because the alternative was crying. And then the phone call, the drunk driver, the hospital, the machines, the silence that followed. deeper than any power outage, any wedding cancellation, any betrayal by a sister who'd decided my happiness was negotiable. I survived it. Because I had to. Because Emma needed me to. Because James would have wanted me to. I built a business. Medical billing. The kind of unglamorous work that pays well and can be done from anywhere. I bought the house. I made friends. I lived. But I never went back. Never called my father. Never sent Rachel the photos she demanded, the updates she expected, the proof that I was doing okay, so she could feel better about what she'd done. Until now. Until the lawyer's letter. Until the notification that Robert James Caldwell was dead, and his daughters were required to attend the reading of his will. I called the lawyer back on Friday, confirmed I'd attend. Asked about Rachel. Was she coming? Yes, the lawyer said. With her husband? Mark. The names landed like stones in still water. Rachel. Mark. The pair who'd rewritten my future with a conversation in a dressing room. Who'd built a life on the ruins of mine. Who'd had 3 children while I buried my husband. Who'd probably never spent a single night wondering if they'd done the right thing. I thought about not going. About letting the will read itself. Letting Rachel inherit whatever she wanted. Letting the past stay buried with the dead. But something stopped me. Something that had been growing for 5 years. Something that had started as a seed of anger and hardened into something else. Resolve? Purpose. The understanding that survival wasn't enough. I deserved to be seen. To be witnessed. To stand in the same room as the people who'd hurt me and not flinch. And something else. Something I hadn't admitted to myself until I stood in my closet, staring at the box that held my wedding dress. The dress I'd never worn. The dress that represented everything Rachel had taken. I wanted her to see me, to see what I'd become, to understand that her victory had been hollow, that the life she'd stolen had never been hers to keep, that the sister she'd dismissed as unstable had built something real while she was busy performing happiness. I wanted her to know I'd won, not by taking anything from her, just by surviving, by thriving. By refusing to let her definition of me be the final word. I pulled the dress from the box, held it up to the light. The lace was yellowed slightly, aged by 5 years in darkness, but it was still beautiful. Still the dress I'd chosen for the life I'd wanted, the life I never got. I put it back, closed the box, and went shopping for something else. Something black, something simple, something that said, I'm not the bride anymore. I'm the widow. And I'm not here for your approval. The church smelled like lilies and old wood, the particular combination of decay and perfume that follows death through its rituals. I arrived early because punctuality had been beaten into me by a mother who believed lateness was a moral failing, and because I wanted to choose my seat, my angle, my view of the door where Rachel would enter. I chose the left side, 3rd row from the front, close enough to see the casket, far enough to watch the entrance. A position of advantage, the kind I'd learned to value in business negotiations and playground politics. The church filled slowly. People I didn't recognize, faces that blurred together, the usual collection of funeral attendees, distant relatives, business associates, neighbors who'd come for the free lunch and the gossip. I sat alone, my black dress simple and well-cut, the kind of garment that whispered money without shouting it, the kind that said, I'm doing fine, don't ask. And then they arrived. Rachel first, of course. Rachel always first. Rachel always center. Rachel always the star of whatever production she was directing. She swept through the doors on Mark's arm, her black dress designer and dramatic, the kind of mourning that looked more like fashion than grief. 3 children followed. 2 girls, 1 boy, all under 8, all dressed in miniature formal wear that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Mark looked older, thinner. The boyish charm that had made me fall in love at 25 had hardened into something tired, something worn around the edges. His eyes scanned the church without really seeing, the glaze of a man who'd learned to perform attendance without engagement, Rachel saw me immediately. Her eyes locked onto mine with the precision of a predator spotting prey, and I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or assessment. The quick calculation of whether I represented a threat to her narrative, her victory, her carefully constructed story of having saved Mark from my instability. She leaned into Mark, whispered something. He looked at me briefly, without recognition. Or maybe with recognition that he'd trained himself to suppress, the way you suppress a memory that brings shame. They sat in the front row, the family row, the place reserved for the grieving daughter and her successful husband and their perfect children. The place that should have been mine, 5 years ago, in a different church, with a different man, on a different day, that never happened. The service was standard. Prayers, hymns, a eulogy from a pastor who'd never met my father but spoke about him with the confident vagueness of someone reading from notes. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough for this family, enough for this life, enough for the father who'd chosen Rachel's version of events because it was easier than asking questions. When it ended, when the casket was wheeled out and the organ played its final dirge, I waited. Let Rachel work the room, accept condolences, perform her grief for an audience that didn't know her well enough to see the performance for what it was. She found me by the flowers. The arrangement I'd sent. Simple white roses, no card, just my name on the florist's invoice. She touched a petal, turned to me, smiled the smile she'd perfected in mirrors since childhood. Claire. My name, drawn out like a discovery, like she'd forgotten I existed and was pleasantly surprised to remember. You came. I wasn't sure you would. Why wouldn't I? He was my father too. Was he? The smile sharpened, gained an edge. I wasn't sure you remembered. 5 years is a long time. So much can change. She looked me up and down, the assessment quick and brutal. You're looking, well, simple. But well, thank you. And the husband? James, was it? She said the name like it tasted bad, like it was a flavor she'd rejected. I heard he passed. I'm sorry. Tragic, really. To lose someone so suddenly. The word hung between us, loaded with implication. Suddenly. As opposed to deliberately, the way she'd taken Mark. As opposed to carefully, the way she'd planned my destruction. Yes, I said. It was tragic. But I survived. Emma and I survived. Emma? My daughter. She's 4. Rachel's smile flickered just for a moment. The crack in her armor, the place where my life had produced something hers hadn't. A child born of love rather than calculation, a family built on choice rather than conquest. How nice, she said, recovering. A child. And no husband. That must be difficult. Financially, I mean. Emotionally, of course, but mostly, she touched my sleeve, the gesture intimate and condescending. Financially. I know how hard it is to make ends meet. Mark and I, we struggle too, even with his salary. 3 children, the mortgage, the private school. You can't imagine. I can imagine, I said. I have a mortgage too, and a business, and employees who depend on me. A business? The surprise was genuine, and I savored it. The crack widening, the armor shifting. What kind of business? Medical billing. We handle accounts for 12 hospitals in 3 states. It's not glamorous, but it's profitable. I paused, let the information settle. Very profitable, actually. We cleared 2 million last year. Rachel's hand dropped from my sleeve. Her eyes narrowed, recalculating, reevaluating the threat level of the sister she'd dismissed as broken. That's impressive, she said, the word drawn out like taffy, stretched thin. For someone with no formal training, no connections, no what, Rachel? No husband to open doors? No sister to steal my fiancé and call it rescue? The words came out calm, measured, the voice I used for difficult clients and overdue invoices. Rachel blinked, caught off guard by directness, by the absence of the shame she'd expected me to carry. I didn't steal him, she said, automatic after 5 years of repetition. He chose. He chose better. Did he? I looked past her, to where Mark stood by the door, accepting condolences with the distracted air of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He looks tired, Rachel. He looks like a man who's been chosen for 5 years and is wondering when he gets to make his own choices. Don't. Her voice sharpened, losing its performative warmth. Don't pretend you know anything about my marriage, about my life. You ran away, Claire. You disappeared. You were always weak, always running, always. Always what? I stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume, the same scent she'd worn at my engagement party, the scent that now made my stomach clench with memory. Always surviving? Always rebuilding? Always finding a way to be happy despite you? Not because of you? Rachel's jaw tightened. The mask slipped, revealing the thing underneath. Not grief, not sorrow, but rage. The rage of someone who'd built her identity on a victory that was starting to look like a prison, who'd defined herself against my failure, and was discovering that I'd stopped failing. You think you've won, she whispered, leaning in, the words intended for my ears alone. You think your little business, your little house, your little life, you think that makes you something? You're nothing, Claire. You were nothing when I took Mark, and you're nothing now. A widow with a child and a spreadsheet. That's not winning. That's existing. She stepped back, smoothed her dress, restored her smile. The performance resuming, the mask clicking into place. Enjoy the reception, she said, loud enough for nearby mourners to hear. The food is excellent. Mark's mother chose the caterer. She has such wonderful taste, not like some people who wouldn't know quality if it. I know quality, I interrupted. I know it when I see it, and I know it when I don't. I turned, walked toward the door, toward the exit, toward the street where my car was parked. But not my car. Not today. Today, I'd arranged for something else. It was parked at the curb, a black stretch that seemed to absorb the afternoon light, that made the other cars on the street look like toys. The driver stood by the door, gloved hands clasped, eyes forward. Professional, discreet. The kind of service that cost more than most people made in a month. I walked toward it without looking back, without checking if Rachel was watching, if Mark had noticed, if the funeral crowd was whispering about the sister who'd arrived alone and was leaving like royalty. The driver opened the door. I slid inside, onto leather that smelled like money and possibility, into the cool darkness of a space that was mine and only mine. And then he stepped out. Not from the church, not from the crowd. From the other side of the limousine, the door I hadn't used, the entrance that had been planned with the precision of a military operation. Daniel Caldwell, James's twin brother. The brother I'd met at the funeral 2 years ago. The brother who'd held me while I cried. The brother who'd flown back every month to check on Emma, to help with the business, to be the family I'd lost when James died. The brother I'd married 11 months ago. Quietly, privately. No ceremony, no guests, no Rachel to destroy. Just a judge, a witness, and the understanding that some love doesn't need performance to be real. He was dressed in black, same as me, but his suit was tailored in a way that made Rachel's designer dress look like costume jewelry. His hair was silver at the temples, the same premature graying that James had had, the same genetic stamp that made people do double takes when they saw them together. But James was gone, and Daniel was here. And the difference between them, the thing that made me love Daniel without confusing him with his brother, was in his eyes. James had looked at the world with hope, with optimism, with the belief that people were fundamentally good. Daniel looked at the world with understanding, with acceptance, with the knowledge that people were complicated and that love was a choice you made every day. He sat beside me, took my hand, said nothing. He knew what I needed. Not words, not reassurance, just presence. The weight of someone who was choosing to be here, now, in this moment that we'd both been planning for weeks. She saw, I said finally. She saw the car. She didn't see me. She will. Yes. He squeezed my hand. She will. We waited. The limousine was a stage, and we were setting the scene, arranging the props, preparing for the entrance that would rewrite 5 years of narrative. It didn't take long. Rachel appeared at the church doors, Mark trailing behind her like an afterthought. She was scanning the street, looking for my car, my escape, my retreat into the obscurity she'd assigned me. Her eyes found the limousine, impossible to miss, deliberate in its presence. And I saw her pause, saw her lean toward Mark, say something, gesture toward the car. Saw Mark look, shrug, the gesture of a man who'd stopped being interested in his wife's dramas years ago. Saw Rachel start toward us, her heels clicking on the pavement, her stride purposeful and predatory. The walk of a woman who expected to win every confrontation, who'd never met a situation she couldn't control, with enough confidence and cutting remarks. The driver opened my door. I stepped out, smoothing my simple black dress, adjusting my posture, preparing for the performance that would end 5 years of silence. Rachel stopped 10 feet away. Her eyes moved from me to the limousine to the open door where Daniel was still seated, visible only as a silhouette in the dark interior. Well, she said, the word drawn out, assessing. This is unexpected. A limousine, Claire? For a funeral? That's not like you. That's not... She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. That's not simple. No, I agreed. It's not. Is this your new... what? Boyfriend? Sponsor? She laughed again, louder this time, performing for the mourners who were beginning to gather at the church doors, drawn by the spectacle. Oh, Claire, you always did need someone to take care of you. First James, now. Who? Some client from your little business? Some man who feels sorry for the poor widow? Daniel stepped out. The movement was smooth, unhurried, the entrance of a man who didn't need to rush because he owned the time he moved through. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and looked at Rachel with the expression he used for incompetent employees and bad investments, polite, distant, thoroughly unimpressed. Rachel's face went through a series of transformations faster than I could track. Recognition, because Daniel looked like James, because the genetic similarity was unmistakable. Confusion, because James was dead, because she'd attended the funeral via Facebook post, because she'd never bothered to learn the details of my life after I disappeared. And finally, dawning horror, as she connected the limousine, the suit, the presents, to something she hadn't anticipated. She started. Daniel Caldwell, he said, his voice the deeper version of James's, the same timbre with different resonance. James's brother, Claire's husband. The word landed like a physical blow. Rachel actually stepped back, her heel catching on a crack in the pavement, her hand reaching for Mark's arm with the desperation of a woman who'd just felt the ground shift beneath her. Husband? The word came out strangled, disbelieving. You're married? To James's brother? 11 months ago, I said. Private ceremony. No guests. We felt no need to perform our happiness for people who'd never wished us well. Rachel's eyes moved from Daniel to me, to the limousine, to the small crowd that had gathered at the church doors. I could see her calculating, searching for an angle, a response, a way to regain control of a situation that had spun completely beyond her grasp. That's... She started, stopped, started again. That's disgusting. That's pathological. You couldn't keep one brother, so you... I loved James, I interrupted, my voice still calm, still measured. The voice of a woman who'd learned to speak through grief and come out stronger on the other side. I love Daniel. They're different men, Rachel. Different in ways you can't understand because you've never seen anyone as a person, only as a prize, a status symbol, a victory to be won. You're sick, Rachel spat, but the words lacked conviction, the venom diluted by shock. You're actually sick. Mark, tell her. Tell her how How what? Mark spoke for the first time, his voice tired, detached. The voice of a man who'd stopped participating in his wife's performances years ago. How she's wrong. She's not wrong, Rachel. She's just not what you said she was. Rachel turned to him, her face a mask of betrayal. Whose side are you on? I'm not on anyone's side. Mark pulled his arm free from her grip, the gesture slow and deliberate, the first independent movement I'd seen him make. I'm just tired. Of all of it. Of the performances, the competitions, the constant need to prove we're winning. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time in 5 years. I'm sorry, Claire, for everything. I was stupid, and weak, and I let her— He gestured toward Rachel. I let her convince me that what we had wasn't enough, that you weren't enough. And I've spent 5 years learning that nothing is ever enough for someone who measures love by what they can take from others. Rachel made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since she walked into my dressing room 5 years ago. Mark, don't. He held up a hand, the gesture firm, final. I'm going to stay with my mother for a while. The kids can visit. But I'm done, Rachel. I'm done being your trophy. Your proof. Your better choice. He walked away. Not dramatically, not cinematically, just practically, the way I'd walked away 5 years ago. Toward a different life, a different possibility, an escape from a prison that had looked like victory from the outside. Rachel watched him go, her face a battlefield of emotions. Rage, fear, desperation, the dawning understanding that her carefully constructed empire was built on sand, that the sister she dismissed as broken had built something real while she was busy performing success. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But 5 years is a long time, and some wounds don't heal. They just scar over, reminders of what you survived. There's more, I said. Rachel turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed, her composure cracking like old paint. What? What more could you possibly— The will. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the envelope the lawyer had given me that morning, before the service, in a private meeting she'd known nothing about. Our father's will. He changed it 3 months ago. After I visited him, after I told him the truth about what happened, about why I really left, about the text messages you sent me, the ones where you bragged about winning, about saving Mark from my instability. Rachel's face went pale. You visited him. Once a month for the past year. He was lonely, Rachel. You were too busy with your charity boards and your social calendar to notice. But I noticed. I flew in. I sat with him. I told him about Emma, about James, about Daniel, about the business, the house, the life I'd built. I paused, let the information settle. And he listened. Really listened. For the first time in 5 years, someone in this family listened to me. I opened the envelope, pulled out the document, the legal paper that changed everything. The house, I said. The one you live in. The one Dad bought for cash in 1989. The one you told everyone was the family estate. The one you used as collateral for Mark's car and your renovations and the kids' private school. It's mine now. Dad left it to me, along with the investment portfolio, the lake house, and the majority share of the family business. Rachel shook her head, the gesture automatic, disbelieving. No, that's not— He can't. I'm the one who— Who what? Who visited? Who called? Who cared about anything except what you could extract? I folded the will, put it back in the envelope. He saw the truth, Rachel. At the end, when it mattered, he finally saw, and he tried to make it right. Not because it fixes what you did, but because it's what justice looks like, even when it's late. I turned to Daniel. He was watching me with the expression he always wore when I was being strong. Pride, love, the quiet certainty that I was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough. One more thing, I said, turning back to Rachel. The company. Caldwell Medical. The one Dad founded. The one you never bothered to learn about because business is boring. Daniel inherited controlling interest. As my husband, that makes him your boss, Rachel whispered, the words barely audible, the sound of a woman who'd finally run out of moves. Your landlord, actually, I corrected. The house is in my name, the company is in Daniel's. And as of this morning, I pulled out my phone, showed her the email from the property management company. I've terminated your lease. You have 60 days to vacate, or you can buy the property at market value. Current estimate, 4.2 million. Rachel said nothing. For the first time in our lives, my sister had no words. No cutting remark, no competitive comeback, no way to reframe the situation as her victory. She just stood there, in her designer black dress, in front of the church where our father's funeral had just ended, and watched as the life she'd built on my destruction crumbled around her. I didn't stay to watch her cry. I'd cried enough for both of us, 5 years ago, in a Denver apartment with a man who'd held me without asking questions. The tears were done. The revenge was complete. The only thing left was the future. Daniel opened the limousine door. I slid inside, onto the leather that smelled like money and possibility, into the cool darkness of a space that was mine and only mine. He followed. The door closed. The driver pulled away from the curb, leaving Rachel standing on the pavement, growing smaller in the rearview mirror, becoming the kind of memory that fades with distance and time. Are you okay? Daniel asked. I thought about it. Really thought. The way I'd learned to do in therapy, in grief groups, in the quiet hours before dawn when the house was asleep and my mind was finally still. Yes, I said, and meant it. I'm okay. I'm better than okay. I'm free. He took my hand. I leaned into his shoulder, into the warmth of a man who'd chosen me without competition, without conquest, without the need to prove anything to anyone. The limousine moved through the city, past the church, past the life I'd left, past the sister who'd defined herself by taking what was mine, toward home, toward Emma, who was with the nanny, who would want to hear about the funeral, who would ask about Aunt Rachel with the innocent curiosity of a child who didn't understand adult cruelty. Toward the future, the real one, not the performance, not the competition, not the endless need to prove I was enough. Just life, just love, just the simple, profound freedom of being seen. Part 4. 60 days later. The house was empty when I walked through it. Not my house, the other house, the family estate, the property I'd inherited and then sold to a developer who planned to turn it into condominiums. The house where Rachel had raised her children, performed her marriage, built her identity as the successful daughter, the winner, the one who'd chosen better. She'd fought the eviction, of course, hired lawyers, filed motions, tried to claim that our father's will was invalid, that I'd manipulated him, that I was unstable and vengeful, and all the other words she'd used 5 years ago to justify taking Mark. The judge had ruled in my favor. The will was clear. The evidence was documented. The monthly visits, the phone calls, the gradual rebuilding of a relationship that Rachel had never bothered to maintain. Rachel and the children were living with Mark's mother now, in a house half the size, in a neighborhood that didn't impress. Mark had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, the legal euphemism for 5 years of performance that had finally exhausted even his capacity for pretense. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances, the ones who'd reached out after the funeral, who'd seen the limousine, who'd whispered about the will, who'd finally started to question the narrative Rachel had sold them. She was working now, apparently. Real estate, something she'd once dismissed as beneath her. Trying to rebuild, to recalibrate, to find a new identity that didn't depend on being better than me. I wished her well, in the distant way you wish well for strangers. Not because I'd forgiven her. Forgiveness was a process, not a destination, and I was still traveling. But because her unhappiness no longer defined my happiness, because I'd stopped measuring my life against hers, because the competition she'd created had always been a game for one, and I'd finally stopped playing. Daniel was in the kitchen when I got home, making dinner with Emma, the two of them laughing over something that involved too much flour and not enough precision. Emma ran to me when I walked in, her arms sticky with dough, her face alight with the particular joy of a child who felt safe and loved and seen. "Mommy, we're making pizza. Daniel says we can put anything on it." "Anything?" I picked her up, held her close, breathed in the smell of childhood and flour and uncomplicated happiness. "Even pineapple?" "Especially pineapple," Daniel called from the kitchen, his voice warm, amused, present in a way that Jake had never been, that Mark had never learned to be. We ate dinner at the small table in our kitchen, the one that seated four comfortably, six if we squeezed. No formal dining room, no performance of family, just food and conversation, and the easy intimacy of people who'd chosen each other. After Emma was asleep, after the dishes were done, after the house settled into its nighttime rhythm, Daniel found me on the porch, looking at the stars. "Thinking about her?" he asked, sitting beside me, his shoulder warm against mine. "Not really," I said. "I was thinking about Dad, about the will, about why he finally believed me." "Because you showed up," Daniel said. "When it mattered. When no one was watching. That's what belief looks like. Not words, not promises, just presence. Just showing up, again and again, until the truth becomes undeniable." I leaned into him. "Is that why you keep showing up?" "That's why I keep showing up." He kissed my forehead, my temple, the corner of my mouth. "Because you're worth showing up for. Because Emma is worth showing up for. Because this—" He gestured at the house, the yard, the life we'd built. "This is worth showing up for." We sat in silence, watching the stars, listening to the night sounds of a neighborhood that didn't care about our past, our drama, our 5-year competition that had finally ended. And I thought about Rachel, about where she was, what she was doing, whether she'd learned anything from the collapse of her carefully constructed victory. I hoped she had. Hoped she'd find something real, something that didn't depend on comparison or conquest, something that looked like the love I'd found with James and then with Daniel. But that was her journey, not mine. My journey was here, on this porch, with this man, in this life that no one could take because no one had given it to me. I'd built it myself. Through grief and rage and the quiet, stubborn refusal to let my sister's definition of me be the final word. The phone rang inside. Daniel went to answer it, his footsteps fading into the house, leaving me alone with the stars and the silence. I didn't need to know who was calling. Didn't need to check, to worry, to anticipate crisis. Whatever it was, we'd handle it. Together. The way we'd handled everything since Denver, since the funeral, since the limousine and the will, and the moment when Rachel finally understood that winning my fiance didn't mean she'd won my life. I was still here, still standing, still building. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not the house, not the will, not the moment when my sister's face crumbled with the understanding that she'd lost. The victory was this: the porch, the stars, the man inside who'd chosen me without competition, the child asleep upstairs who'd never know her aunt as anything except a cautionary tale, a distant relative, a name in a story about a time before her mother learned to stop performing and start living. The victory was peace, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't need an audience, that simply exists in the quiet spaces between obligations and expectations. I stood, stretched, walked inside to find Daniel, to finish the evening, to begin tomorrow. The competition was over. The race was run. And for the first time in 35 years, I wasn't looking back to see who was behind me. I was just moving forward, one step at a time, into whatever came next.